Well, when I was in Atlanta, I worked in special ed for 11 years. And I worked as a speech pathologist and worked with special needs kids. And then I had Matthew, my son, and he was diagnosed at 18 months. After he was diagnosed, I searched the internet, the bookstores couldn't figure out what to do. The services that they provided in Atlanta weren't enough. And so until he was 3, they wanted me to take him to the school system. Well, the school system was fine, but they didn't have the resources or the staff to do what I needed. So I finally found a private ABA school in Atlanta, and they were phenomenal. And he just blossomed, did really well. And then we moved to Tennessee. There was nothing like that here at that time. And so we had therapists come to the house, and Matthew didn't like that, and we just felt trapped in our house. And I thought, well, it's pretty scary as a parent to only rely on the school system or people coming to your home. What else is there out there for them? And so my husband and I decided to start the Autism Foundation of Tennessee. And what we really wanted was a place not only for therapy, like a combination of therapy with the ABA, the speech, the occupational therapy, just trying to treat the whole child, but also a place for support for the parents so they could come, we could talk about any biomedical, the internal issues that they have a place to turn and talk with other parents. So, because there's really no textbook or any cookie cutter therapy for a child with autism. It's unique to each child. We offer ABA therapy, which is applied behavior analysis. We do speech and language therapy, and our speech pathologist specializes in autism, which is very hard to find. Occupational therapy, where she specializes in sensory integration, and we have support for the biomedical. And we're starting to do a summer camp where we work on academics as well. So we try to just, any need the child with autism has, we try to find someone who can help them. That's really tough. Most insurance companies do not pay for autism therapy, and if they do, it's very limited. So in our history with Matthew, insurance wouldn't pay for anything. If we had a couple of speech and occupational therapy paid for, but mostly it was all out of pocket. So it's very, very tough. And it's tough for the foundation without the funds right now to turn these families away because the insurance companies won't pay. What I think we should do is increase the awareness, really make sure that the teachers and the aides are trained in the school system, to train the parents. If your child's having this behavior, this is what you do, this is what you don't do to escalate it, to help with their communication. I think most kids, it's so frustrating to them to not be able to communicate. We really feel like we just need to help train the parents and teachers. Just, like I said, don't give up hope. Just keep taking them to therapy, keep just working with them and loving them, and know that they're going to get better.
I am the clinical director. I have a board-certified, I'm board-certified behavior analyst, so I oversee the other therapists for therapy and do kind of programming, kind of whatever needs to be done. That's what I do. I do the ABA therapy, which is the applied behavior analysis therapy, which is a little different than what most people think is ABA. When people hear ABA, they think immediately like one-on-one training, but it's actually incorporation of that there's the basic behavior analysis that was conducted with the principles of behavior analysis. So then we did a lot with animals like rats and pigeons, and then we took those principles, applied them to human beings pretty much, and then we individualize them for each individual depending on what they need. It doesn't have to, they can have a diagnosis or they can be typical developing, but that's where the applied behavior analysis aspect comes in. But what you actually apply is not, it just determines on what the kid needs or adult. You know, I think is the fact that opposed to other disabilities, you know, children with autism, it's when they get the diagnosis. Like they were typically developing, and then all of a sudden around the age 1.5 to 2, sometimes younger than 1.5 years, they get this diagnosis. So for me, the challenge is not about working with the child per se, but listening to the parents' stories. Knowing that their child was on track, that they were typical developing, had speech, was doing all these skills, and then was almost like to them in one day, they're wiped away and they don't know where to turn to and they don't know what to do, and they come to you and they beg for you to help them. And almost a lot of parents say, fix my child. And we know they want them to talk or be toilet trained. And for me, that's probably the worst of it, because there's nothing you can say to a parent to make them feel better. Where, a traumatic brain injury, it's kind of like an instance. They know what caused a traumatic brain injury. Or with mental retardation, usually they're born with that disability, where autism, there's no reason why. And so you're left and they ask you and you're going, I don't know, but I'll help you as much as I can. So I would say that's the behaviors, and helping them get better is not what's difficult. It's answering the parents' questions. When I think it's individual, just like our program's individualized, but it's when a child starts making sounds for the first time. And you know that that parent hasn't, it could have been months before they heard that child make a like bah, or like even any type of like mom or dad or anything. It's when they're getting back to that, so the parents see hope. That's the reward, is watching the child, like the littlest things, like whether they go to the bathroom in the toilet for the first time, or they don't yell an entire session, and then when their behavior's under control, and then they make those advancements back to where the parents remember, when the parents actually see their child again and they don't just see the diagnosis. That would be the biggest reward. I think early intervention is so important for the fact that the earlier you can start a program, the better off that child will be. Like, you can get them where they, as close to when they started to lose their academic skills or any type of skills, whether it's verbal skills or imitation skills or whatever it is, where their deficits are, their motor skills. The sooner you can get there, the sooner you're going to see progress, because you're going to target as soon as they've lost it. And their brain is still developing, so it's on that developmental level of where the brain is, where the sooner you catch them, the sooner it's going to go from like less repetition, the better they're going to generalize to other areas, pick up tasks faster. And it also depends on their level of functioning, but in most cases, the sooner you can get to them, just like anybody else, the sooner you get something going, the better off you are. The getting started part is really difficult. I think the frustration with insurance companies, which I know there's a process they have to go through, but it's the families that have to wait. I've worked with families that they were on the waiting list for 6 months to a year. They finally got insurance, and then they were on another waiting list after they got the insurance for another 6 months to a year, and by the time they got the therapy they needed, 2 years had gone by. 2 years of critical time for therapy, whether it was ABA, speech, OT, whatever type of therapy that was needed, that time was passed. And even if 3 months go by, it's just every day matters in the life of a child with autism and to the families. And I think that's what's frustrating, that there's the early intervention programs, there's limited, and there's nothing for the families to engage in if they can't afford out of pocket before the insurance companies kick in. So I'll just say that would be my frustration, is watching the families squirm. I think there needs to be a lot more education, not just for facilities, but for families and parents. Like, there needs to be that website that families can go to that answers all their questions, where it's about, like, where do I take my kid to school, what's offered. They get the runaround so much, and for me, that's frustrating, because they'll come, they don't know where to go, they don't know who to turn to, and then you try to direct them, and then you think you're directing the right spot, and then they get shifted off in another direction. And the limited knowledge about autism, there's so many things on the internet about what's going to cure autism, what's the new fad, what's this, and parents want their child back, and so they'll try everything. And I watch families waste so much money and time on all these therapies that haven't been proven effective. And I would love for families to actually see what's effective and go that route and take their time. Interview people, see what's going on, see what's going to work for their kid. Just like a program's individualized, individualize where you go, make it specific for your kid, because I might work well with some kids, but I know I don't work well with them all. So I'm not going to be a good fit for everyone, and I want families to look at that. Instead of just putting them into an ABA program, is it going to work for them? And I think parents just need more knowledge, and to start increasing that for autism, like, we need more resources for them. Take your time. Let it settle in. I know that the denial is there. You're going to grieve. Go through the process. Like, you're going to be in denial. You're going to ask all your friends and family, like, can it be? Or maybe, maybe they have a hearing issue. Maybe, they're just slow learners. Maybe they're going to be late bloomers. Take your time. don't rush in and say, oh my gosh, my kid has autism, what do I do now? And then go through the grieving period. Your child's going to be different because of the autism. You know, that there's going to be typical signs and symptoms that are going to go along with it, but then also remember that it's still your kid. There are little quirks that you think are because of autism could be the same for another typical individual child at that same age that, you know, they might engage in hand flapping too, which is typical of autism, but they might do it as a joke. Like, laugh at the little things. Don't get so frustrated that maybe your child's running around the house. Like, still play with your kid. Engage in play. Like, engage in imagination and enjoy the time that you have, because it's going to pass you by, and then when you realize that it's gone, you can't get it back. And that's what I would say to parents, is that still look at your kid as it's a kid. You're still raising an adult. You still want to get them to the next stepping stone, but remember that it's going to be hard for you as a parent, but if you can just accept them, get through that process, love your kid. Every day, just love that you still have your kid and that you still have them, because I know there's parents out there that would take a child with autism because they've lost their child. And so I would tell parents is that your child's not lost, they're just a little behind, but we can get them to the next level.
I think the challenge is that the range is so different. You can have very mild to very severe, and the one diagnosis of autism does not really describe the child. They could manifest many different symptoms and be completely different. So if you have two children with autism, you might see a totally different child. So you have to just basically get to know the kid individually, get to know their needs, and decide what treatment is best for them. The rewards I've had, usually when I receive a child, they appear to be very low functioning. Sometimes they're nonverbal. They do not seem to have many skills. And quickly, shortly after working with them, we've noticed that they make huge advancements. Sometimes they start making sounds they've never made before. Then you will start to hear one or two words perhaps. And also just, they seem to come to life. They seem to respond more. They have more of a desire to relate to others. And so you just see such improvement in a short time. I think early intervention is important because the sooner you get the diagnosis, the better the prognosis is for the child. Therapy is so vital, and if you can get it when they're young, their improvements usually are very good. Well, I think awareness needs to be made. I think some people still are very frightened by the word autism, and I think there is a lot of hopelessness that comes with that diagnosis. And so I think if we can rephrase it, or just revamp the whole idea behind it, giving parents hope, letting them know that there's so much treatment out there, that it's so different even than 20 years ago. The improvements that are made, the therapy that's given. I think, we struggle so much trying to bill insurance companies for particular therapies, and we would love to see more therapies be paid for by insurance companies. Huge. I think a lot of companies, you give your money and you're not really sure where it goes. And I know just to take our center for example, if we could even have companies adopt a child perhaps, and their donations could go to one particular family or several families, and then they could know, they could drive down the street and see the improvements that are being made in their kids. It's very tangible. And so I would love to have some companies donate money, and we could provide therapy for 4 or 5 families based on one donation from one company, and it'd make a huge difference.
They respond great. I mean, music, for me, if I was to speak in front of people and talk about it, I would first and foremost say that there's a universal love for music. And it doesn't matter who you are, if you're diagnosed with autism, if you're in your 90s, if you're 5 years old, religion, culture, it doesn't matter. So they love it. And they get a huge kick out of it, and it's a great. It's great for all their senses. It's great for my senses, and we can use it as a break activity. We can use it as a functional activity to teach them, rhythm, counting, identifying. You can use children's books with songs. So there's a lot of things you can do with music, but to plainly answer the question, they love music, and I try to use it as much as I can to break up some of the more structured academic activity. I always try to intertwine music into my therapy sessions. Yeah, we have meetings every Saturday or every other Saturday right now, and we try to pair kids that are around the same age and functioning level based on how much verbal skills they have, and what we do is just push interaction with each other, and we try to structure the environment so it's natural activities. So you'd go to a school and you'd see different. Whether it's different stations or circle activities that kids rotate to and from, but we always incorporate art, music, sensory activities, some academic activities, question and answer activities, physical exercise, playing, and we try to find things that the kids like, that they have in common, and then pair them with each other and push them to talk to each other, take turns, share, and we role model appropriate interaction skills, safety skills. We push them to wait in situations where they need to wait, and we push them to always use their words and try to communicate as much as possible with each other and with staff. I think education for everyone is the most important thing, and also to remember that they're not as different as people might think they are. They have a lot of common likes that we have, that anybody has, and they, if we are educated about how to detect it at an early age, then we can prepare for challenging behaviors. We can prepare for interventions that will increase their communication, which will in the future decrease any challenging behaviors because of a deficit in communication. And realize that sometimes they aren't that much different than what you might call a typical kid. They just need different styles of teaching, and they need it in a whole more intense manner.
Portia, tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, how many kids do you have?
I have 2 children, 2 boys. Trey Amos, who has autism, he's 7 years old, and I have a 16-year-old, his name is Trey.
So you have a son that's on the spectrum, one son on the spectrum.
Yes.
And how old is he now?
He's 7.
How old was he when he got diagnosed?
18 months.
So you have a son that went through the diagnosis at 18 months. Tell me a little bit about your journey. After you got diagnosed, did you get therapy right away?
No, actually we didn't get therapy right away. I started noticing him falling behind on the development chart when he was maybe around 10 months, and then I kept bringing it to his pediatrician's attention, and he kept telling me that it was because he was the second child and putting it off, and eventually I thought he couldn't hear anymore because all his speech had gone away. And I took him to the health department to get his hearing tested, and they told me that since he was nonverbal he couldn't have his hearing tested, so he had to go to Vanderbilt. But the lady that was there at the health department told me that she'd seen a lot of signs of autism in him, and she gave me Tennessee Early Interventions number, and we got some therapy, not very much, until he was diagnosed, which was at 18 months.
What kind of therapy did you get?
He's had occupational therapy, which was in school, and speech therapy in school, and now getting ABA therapy at Autism Foundation.
Now you talked about, let's go back to when he was 18 months. What was your reaction? Like, you have a child, people were telling you that he was acting the way he was because he was a second child, and then you take him to get his hearing tested. What was it were you relieved, or how did you feel when he got that autism diagnosis?
Well, when she told me that she seen a lot of signs of autism in him, I immediately started to do research and read up on what I could find, which was very little. And so I kind of already had the idea that I was going to get that diagnosis, but when I actually got it, it was devastating. And from that point on, it was just trying to get therapy and get something going for him from then.
What kind of was going through your mind? Like, I mean, I don't have a child with autism. Like, what was going through your mind? Like, it was devastating, but what were you thinking about Trayamis? Like, how did you, like, did your view of him change? Like, what was going on?
Well, it's just devastating because one minute you have a kid that's, like, for instance, we would go play in the balls at the fun center and he was playing with other kids, and then all of a sudden when my friends would come over, he would go in the room and scream, not wanting to be around anyone. So it's like your child turns into a stranger, and you don't know what to do, and you can't get anything out of them. So it was devastating.
Was Trayamis on the typical developing track? Like, was he verbal? Was he imitating?
Yes, he had speech. He had maybe 7 or 8 words around 14 months, and it just all started to go away slowly. And then one day he just wouldn't come when you would call his name. He wouldn't look at you when you would call his name. He just wanted to sit really close to the TV, and it was just like he was just in his own little shell.
And then he's 7 years old now,
Mhm.
and you've had speech therapy, you have occupational therapy, and then you had applied behavior analysis.
Mhm.
How has that been going for you? Like, have you noticed any changes in Trayamis?
Since he had two sessions of ABA therapy at the Autism Foundation, and after the second session, we started hearing maybe 7 or 8 words that I never knew that TJ could say, and they just started to come out.
How did that feel as a parent?
Great. And now I can just tell him to say something, and he'll try and say it even if it's not the right way, and I've never been able to get him to do that. Maybe before we would hear hi maybe once every other month, or bye every other month, but now he has those words and they're there. And
Now, you said you were on a waiting list, you got TIS, you got the diagnosis, you got insurance. Do you ever get frustrated looking back? I mean, he's 7 now, and in 2 months you saw these advancements, but you weren't getting any therapy. Like, do you ever, if you sat back and got frustrated about, like, what he could have been if you would have got therapy earlier?
definitely, I was trying to get therapy, but it's the insurance. A lot of places, they offer speech therapy, but they don't want to take, TJ has TN, so it was really hard to get someone to accept the TN, and that was the waiting period for me, just getting someone to accept his insurance.
How long did you wait?
Maybe 2.5 or 3 years to get ABA therapy and speech therapy and occupational therapy.
Wow. And, I mean, he's doing great now. What do you see for the future as a parent? Like, does it change? Like, looking back when he was 18 months to when he started, like, at 3 and then 5 and now being 7, like, does your outlook of looking at Trayamis change as a parent of what he could do in the future now?
Well, really, I didn't have high hopes because I wasn't seeing a big change, but just in this last month, I've seen a big change in TJ, so that gives me a lot of inspiration to know that it's no telling what he's going to be able to do, because I was like, he's going to be this way forever. That's just the idea that I had, because I wasn't seeing change. But now I'm really excited. I'm waiting for the sentence. I'm waiting for him to come up and say, Mommy this, Mommy that. So, and I believe it's going to happen.
What's the one thing you want him to say to you as a parent? Like, something that you've never heard him say? Like, what would just bring tears to your eyes? Like, what could Trayamis say to you that would just...
Just coming up saying, Mommy, can I have a drink? Just Mommy, anything. Just any kind of interaction, Mommy. It doesn't have to be Mommy, just to communicate with me, any kind of way.
It's really good. And then, I know, like, it's been a journey for you, and now you see hopes. Like, was there ever a point where you, like, after you got his diagnosis, that you, as a parent, just kind of looked at him differently? Like, you kind of, I mean, everyone talks about, like, when a child gets diagnosed with autism, some of the signs are they go into the shell. They don't make eye contact. They lose their words, and they kind of disappear. Like everyone says, they kind of go into this outer space zone, and you can see it in their eyes. I mean, I've seen pictures. When that happened, did you look at Trayamis one day and say, I don't know where my son is anymore? Like, did you lose him?
Yes, actually I did. And then I kind of started to protect him. I didn't take him around my family because I didn't want them to treat him different, or we kind of stayed in the house mostly, or went to the store only when I didn't have a choice but to take him, because I didn't want people to say that he was a bad kid because he was having a meltdown or kind of lashing out, and I knew that a lot of people wouldn't understand. So it was just, I kind of feel like I kept him in, not caged in, but just in our world at home.
It's funny you brought that up, because I was going to ask you about that. Like, I hear a lot of parents saying, you know, that they almost, not only does their child kind of be secluded in their own little world, but the family, you start to, as a parent, want to protect, and you develop this bubble where you don't let anyone else in because you're afraid of the backlash, because a lot of people don't really understand what autism is. And like you said, like going to the grocery store and things like that, like how else has it affected your life?
Just up until this point, TJ, it was like we couldn't go to the store, we couldn't go into school. It was just a drag. Getting services was a drag. Everything has just been a drag. Even at home with my other son, I have to give him so much attention. Then, you know, it affects my relationship with my other son, because I have to devote most of my time to TJ, and him understanding about TJ, you have to do this and you have to do that. And it's just been a long process, even family-wise. With TJ's dad, you know, everybody's not going to see things the same way, so it's just been a long process.
And how do you do as a parent? I mean, it's a 24-hour job, like you said. Like, it strains on a marriage, it strains on your relationship with your other children. You know, if TJ's having a meltdown, you know, you have to give all the attention to him. It's going to take away from your older child, and obviously he's probably going to start engaging in inappropriate behaviors to compete instead of doing it in a more appropriate way. Like, how do you do it as a mom? I mean, especially too, since moms have that quality of you want to protect and you want to nurture, and it's just this loving quality. Like, how do you do it?
The only way, prayer and just reading, listening to other people's stories, going to support groups, trying to hear what works for one person may not work for another, but just the encouragement and just trying to be persistent about going to therapy. And the therapists, they give you ideas on which ways things work best and how to get TJ to do this to make life more normal.
Makes sense. And then, from your opinion, if you could pick one thing that you believe would, like, needs to happen to help with, like, people like you in your situation or other families that have a child with autism, like, what one thing do you think the state of Tennessee, other people that are dealing with individuals with autism, like the Autism Foundation of Tennessee, what needs to happen to make people's lives a little better?
Awareness. People need to be aware of it, and just learning about it and being open to it. And, like, the main thing I hear from other parents that have kids with autism, and as well as myself, just a lot of pediatricians wanting to put it on the back burner, so to say. They don't just want to say autism, and they don't want to look at it for what it really is and try to put it on everything else. Just to be aware and be persistent about it.
And what about school systems? What can school systems do?
Training for the teachers, just in the aides, and being open to what works for one child may not work for the other. Just being open to treat each child the way that they need to be treated, and not just going on one idea.
And how do you feel about medication? Like, obviously there's a lot of medication that's paired with children and adults and adolescents with autism. What is your view?
I have just found out actually today about supplements, and he has an appointment tomorrow to go to a doctor to see about getting some more information and seeing what's going on and
so
what's
you haven't
out there.
raced into the medicine world.
I just really found out about it today.
And then on a final note, what do you think is some of the most important advice you give other parents in your situation? Like, going back to that day you got the diagnosis, the change in your child, like, what would you say to other parents?
A mother knows, a parent knows. If you see difference in your child, then, I mean, be persistent. Don't let someone tell you that it's nothing. Don't go with your instinct, a mother's instinct or whatever. Just know that you know, and find out whatever it is to find out, and have patience when you get the diagnosis, and just go from there. Don't give up, because it gets better. I'm a witness.
Now, what's your name?
Jacob.
How do you spell that?
Jacob.
What's your last name?
Neves.
How do you spell that?
It's kind of 7 backwards.
I don't know how to spell 7. How do you spell Neves?
Neves.
Thank you. See, I've been away for a while. I forgot how to spell your name. So, Jacob, how old are you?
13.
When did you turn 13?
February 3rd.
Really? That was just recently. Was it? Yes.
Yeah.
Like a month ago?
Yeah, a couple. Yeah, a month.
Well, I'm really far behind. So, Jacob,
Yeah.
you obviously are on the spectrum of autism, right?
Uh-huh.
What do you notice? Like, do you notice that you're different than, let's say, your brother that's typical?
Yeah.
How so? Like,
He's like he's like a lot smarter than me. He's like higher than me.
yeah.
Yeah.
What about at school? Do you think they notice
What?
about you that you might be,
What do you mean?
like, your social skills or might be a little different? Like, do you notice, like do they pick on you or?
Yeah, most kids like pick on me at my school. They usually every time I just do something, they just don't look at me, or they look at me and say, "Oh, your skin,
What's wrong with your skin?
it has psoriasis."
Which is not any part of, like, autism at all, is it?
No,
And a lot of people have it, don't they?
a lot. Even my brother, even my dad and my dad's mom.
Yeah. Do you have friends at school?
Not really.
No. Is that frustrating?
Yes.
Hey, you're doing good, buddy.
Yeah.
Is it your job to make me cry? Is that what you want to do?
No.
Yeah? Is it hard for you to go to school?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. What makes it the hardest for you?
The hardest, I never get help from any friends. I never get help from, I get like barely help from my teachers because they don't understand me. They don't understand barely because of my handwriting.
All right. If you could say one thing to, like, your teachers, like, what would you say to help them understand you? Like, what would help you?
Make new friends. It's very hard. It's just very hard to contact them if I don't know how to speak right.
All right. What makes you think, like, you don't know how to speak right?
Like shyness. It's just mostly it's just the way I look.
Do you know a lot of kids in your position are going to watch this video and you're going to help them? How does that make you feel?
That made me feel a lot better, but I think it just makes, if I get to see them, if I get to see them and talk to them and talk to the way how I feel, the same thing how they feel, probably they could be my friend.
So it would help if there was a lot more groups in town
Yeah.
that you could, like, relate to, that, you know, that does have that social deficit, because it's not a bad thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I talk to you perfectly fine and you make me laugh all the time.
Yeah.
And I've been working with you for a while and you've said some pretty funny things.
Yeah.
And you're probably the best dancer I know in the state of Tennessee.
Yeah, and the singer.
Yeah, and singer too. You have a lot of things going for you, and I think you're suggesting that there should be groups
Yeah.
where individuals your age can go to and, like, hang out, and they don't get picked on. Because I'm guessing that a lot of kids at school don't really
Know me.
know you.
Because they don't want to know me. They're just like, they look at you, but they don't speak to you. They only have friends the way they look, the way they do, the way they talk, maybe.
You made some really good points.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would like to say? Like, if you could change one thing, what would you change?
If I can change one thing, that'll be the change of how I make friends. Yeah.
It's really important to you, huh?
Yeah.
Well, we'll work on that together, okay?
Okay.
Do you have anything else that you want to say? Or?
Just want to say, all the people who's watching this, maybe if you really just don't have the ability to make friends, probably you can make friends with me. Probably that.
I think that was very good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jacob. Thanks, buddy.